I want you to imagine an island. Palm trees and beaches, beautiful water. There are children on this island, and like most children, they're very curious about the world around them. But there's something about the people of the island. They're very good at running. And because they're good at running, that's their singular focus. In their schools, they teach running. They teach classes on nutrition in your stride. You see, there's a problem because not all the children are good runners. Some of the children are slow runners. Some of the children are disabled. Some of the children don't have anyone to run with at home. And because of this, the system still says that they have to meet a standard. They have to run a certain distance and a certain speed in order to graduate. And if they don't, they're failures. This is obviously a fictional situation. But in a very real way, it describes how the education system in this country has a very singular focus. The title of my talk today is Education and Value Proposition. So what is a value proposition? Those of you that are in the business world are probably familiar with it. A value proposition says that if you buy my product or service, I'm guaranteeing a certain value. So purchase my cell phone plan and you'll have this much coverage, or eat this yogurt and you'll be healthier. What is the value proposition of education in this country? What are we telling students they're going to get if they come to our schools for 12 years? I'll give you the textbook answer. Come to school and we'll get you college and career ready. I'll tell you what the value proposition is not. Come to school and we'll teach you to work with others. Come to school and we'll let you be creative and drive your own learning. Come to school and we will assess you by what you can produce and not what you can memorize. In the 20th century, American education was asked to do a lot of things. Early on in the century, it was asked to assimilate a large population of immigrants from Eastern Europe. Then in the 30s and 40s, it was asked to produce skilled labor for manufacturing. At the turn of the last century, it was also asked to increase the number of students that were going to college. But today, it's different. Today, we have to prepare students for jobs that don't even exist yet, to solve problems that we don't even know are problems yet. That's not even speaking about the problems that may be passed from one generation to the next. I want you to do something. I want you to make a list in your mind of a couple things that you think employers look for in college graduates. Just whatever comes to mind. I recently read an article by the CEO of a recruiting firm, and this CEO listed 4 qualities they look for in a college graduate. And those qualities are communication, flexibility, positive attitude, and teamwork. Were any of the things that you thought of on the list? Maybe a few of them. But the question is, do we integrate those soft skills into our schools? Or are students able to graduate with that set of skills? And as a practitioner, I have to say for the most part, no, they really don't. The current paradigm in education is known as the 3 R's. And if you're thinking reading, writing, and arithmetic, you're at least one paradigm shift behind. I'm talking about rigor, relevance, and relationship. And I'm going to speak a little bit more about relevance than the other two. How do state education boards make the decision about what a student needs to know in order to be considered an educated individual? How do they make the decision about what's taught and what students need to learn? And I'll tell you, there's one word that sums it up. And the word is tradition. We learn this way, therefore we're going to continue to do it this way. And to be very honest with you, tradition in education kind of needs to go to the direction of MySpace, okay? There's a few subscribers left, and it's just not that cool to be on it anymore. So I'll give you an example. In this particular state, students either end in the math, what they take in math, they either finish with Algebra 2 or they finish with Pre-Cal, and sometimes they go farther if they're actually doing an elective of taking calculus or whatnot. But statistics is not actually something that's required. Well, the question is, what benefits the whole? What benefits making an educated citizen? What is relevant? What are you going to use every day? Everybody in here uses statistics every single day. Whether you read a news story or you're reading an article, it doesn't matter. Statistics are useful. I'll give you another example. Johnny is a good student, but he's really good at mechanical things. He's been in an auto shop. He enjoys it. But there's a problem because Johnny can't pass a state assessment. So what the system is going to do is it's going to make Johnny a dropout because he can't pass it. He may or may not go on to be successful as a mechanic, but why are we tagging him with the label of being a failure just because there was something that may not be relevant to him that we say he has to know? What about physical education? Is there anyone in here that believes that mandated physical education has done anything to reduce the obesity rate in this country? See, we're already using statistics again. What about rigor? We have a common definition for rigor in education, but the problem is a lot of times rigor gets translated to mean more work and not different work, which is what it should mean. And what about relationship? I had a student once come to me and she said, I'm having some trouble with Ms. Jones. And I said, well, what's the problem? Are you doing your work? Do you understand what's going on? And she said, I don't really know. I said, well, are you asking me to move you out of the class? And she said, no, don't move me out of the class. I love Ms. Jones. Now, wait a minute. You said you were having trouble. Yeah, but I like her. See, learning may not happen even in situations where a student likes a teacher. The opposite is also true. When I was in the classroom, I taught Spanish. And I always liked teaching Spanish 1 because students were always very excited about the possibility and excited about learning a new language. And, they always wanted to learn the most ridiculous things. The boys, the first thing they always asked me is, how do I ask a girl out in Spanish? Which was funny because most of them wouldn't ask a girl out in English. So I don't know what the difference was. But I had this habit, this thing I did when I had a student, inevitably there was somebody who would get frustrated with Spanish. And so what I did is I had an alphabet in the back of the room. It just so happened to be a Russian alphabet. And I'd take them to the back of the room and I'd say, okay, I'll tell you what, I know you're frustrated with Spanish, but if you read this alphabet to me, I'll give you the rest of the week off. And inevitably they look at it and go, I don't know that, that's too hard. I said, right, you know the alphabet in Spanish. So we go back to their desk and we would work on it and they would understand what was going on. See, it had value because it provided them perspective, and that's kind of what I want to do now. I want to provide a new perspective because oftentimes the stakeholders in education are unable or unwilling to hold each other's perspective. And so I'm going to propose a new paradigm. And this paradigm are the 3 C's, and the 3 C's are community, creativity, and customization. The first one is creativity, or the first one is community. And, as humans, we desire to be with other humans. We're social creatures. And my favorite example of community is actually Pixar, wildly successful company. And the thing about Pixar that's interesting is that their physical building is laid out in a way where everybody has to interact. They have one cafeteria and one set of restrooms. So if you're an engineer or you're an animator, at some point you're probably going to run into each other. And you're probably going to solve a problem. The interactions were beneficial to the whole organization. The question is, are our schools structured in a similar way? And I'd have to say, no, not really. Our schools are very departmentalized. They're very hierarchical. In my own story, I'd actually returned from a deployment with the military in the Middle East. When I got into teaching, I figured, hey, I've been to war, how hard can teaching be? So I got hired on in a district and thrown into the middle of the year. There were 9 teachers, 3 of them quit in the middle of the year, which should have been my first sign. And then I proceeded to teach for the rest of the year. And I don't know if you've ever seen the devices, the inflatables, where you put on a Velcro suit and then you jump on it and you stick on the wall. That was kind of their approach to training new teachers. Throw them in the room, if they stick, great. If not, whatever. So anyway, the reason I made it is because I had community with the other new teachers that were in the program. So community is so very important to our schools. With the students, one of my areas of research is advanced placement. And I met with some of our students to do a focus group. And the last question I asked in the focus group was, someday you're going to have children yourself. Would you want them to have the same advanced placement experience you've had? And the answer I got from the students was no. We're talking our best and brightest. And part of the reason was because there's not always a sense of community. One student actually told me that she doesn't ask for answers from people she doesn't trust because people have given her wrong answers so they can make higher grades than her. That's not a sense of community. That's not what we're striving for. What about creativity? There was recently a survey done by a university on teachers to see how creative they were, and this was elementary teachers. And the teachers said they highly valued creativity. But when the researchers got into the room, what they saw was oftentimes teachers will actually downplay or outright punish the most creative students. And the reason is creativity is messy. It requires a certain amount of letting go. And what's easier if you're doing a lesson on the Eiffel Tower? To give them a worksheet or to ask them to build a mock-up of the Eiffel Tower and do a presentation? Obviously, the second option is more difficult. So creativity is very, very important, and we need to integrate it into our schools. The next point is customization. We're no longer just imparting knowledge to students, we're imparting skills. And it's so important to make what they learn relative to what they want to know and what they're interested in. One of the greatest contradictions that I have seen in the push for more testing and standardization is often the groups that lobby for that are business leaders. So I'm going to list a couple of business slogans, and I want you to see if you hear the standardization of these slogans. Innovate, think different, forever new frontiers, imagination at work. Can you hear the standardization? No, these companies are all about innovation. And the same people that push for that standardization are people that drive cars that come with 49 add-ons and 150 channels of satellite radio and have a phone that has 500,000 apps on it. Companies are all about user experience. You live a customizable life. So why, if it's such a good thing, do we not do it in education? We need to. We have to make education customizable so that students will find relevance in what they do. Nothing I've said today is new. There are education reformers and thought leaders that have talked about this sort of thing for years. One of the books that I read this summer was Thomas Kuhn's Structure of Scientific Revolutions, and it's not a book that I would recommend you read unless you absolutely have nothing else to do on a weekend. Because those of you in here that are engineers and scientists probably had to read it in graduate school, and you remember it drags on a little bit. But what's interesting is that Kuhn actually says oftentimes when a new scientific paradigm is introduced, it's not accepted by the current scientists, but often the scientists have to move on, and the new scientists bring the new paradigm with them. We're at a point in this country right now where we have 7 million teachers. In the next 5 to 7 years, about 3 million of them are going to retire. We are at the tipping point in education. We are going to see massive change in the next 5 to 7 years, and it's going to be driven by technology and the customization and the creativity and the community that it's going to create. When I was in the classroom as a Spanish teacher, I would always have a student that would ask me, do I have to do my homework in Spanish? And I had a ready answer. I would always say, no, you don't have to do it in Spanish, but I'm going to grade it in Spanish. So the question is, are we grading what we need to be grading? Are we judging success by the right measure? We are preparing students for a world unlike the one that we grew up in. We need to address education questions as the deep moral questions they are. And they are deep moral questions because they affect an entire generation and an entire society. The value proposition has got to change. The value proposition needs to change to come to school and customize your education. Come to school and be creative. Come to school and find community. As an educator, I don't invest in things. I invest in students. I invest in lives. And the outcome of this is that their success is my success. If we get things right for students individually, the rest will follow. Thank you.